My name is Vince Perez. I'm the Chief of Customs. I'm the Chair for the Guam Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. Welcome to the second day of the subcommittee to meet on the Government of Guam Law Enforcement Officer General Force Leadership Structure Tier Review Input. Today is Thursday, August 18th, and the time is 09:49. I will go through the sheet to identify who's here, and it looks like we do have a quorum. We have Mr. Regis from the Airport Police, Mr. Floss from the Attorney General's Office, Mr. Ugin from Corrections, Mr. Rodaggio from Agriculture, Ms. Farron from Department of Agriculture. We also have Mr. Francisco from Department of Administration, Mr. Bison from Department of Youth Affairs, and Mr. Mantonia from the Guam Airport ARP. Good morning and welcome. So just to recapture what we did yesterday was we went through the lengthy law enforcement general force leadership structure tier document, and I've made notes in moving forward. One of the things that we are mandated to do is to create this force structure in accordance with law. And so some of the things that we've been talking about really are to see what we can do to help facilitate career movements within the government of Guam for respective law enforcement agencies. We discussed some of the complications and the differences between the different organizations. However, it appears that we need to have a clearly defined structure that identifies, generally speaking, different levels in different categories of leadership, knowledge, training, ability. Meaning, if you look at the force structure, it talks about your entry-level tier. It talks about your baseline supervisory tier, it talks about your middle managers, and it talks about your higher strategic level managers as part of this force structure. And currently, when you look across the law enforcement entities, like for similar levels of training, education, experience at the lower levels, for example, they don't really match. It seems like we're not as standardized as we could be, and I know that POST is working towards that end. So this Government of Guam law enforcement force structure will allow us to have a mechanism to be able to move forward. What does that mean for us in law enforcement? That means that we have our work cut out for us. The Department of Administration, the Civil Service Commission, each respective law enforcement agency is going to have to sit down and identify what your core competencies are. You're going to have to conduct a review of your job specifications. What are your requirements in order to get from entry level into your full operating capability for your core competencies, meaning like if you're a patrol officer in the police department, you need to know, powers of arrest, vehicle, emergency vehicle operations, patrolling, all of that. And that's the intention, is so that as you progress in your years of service, it's commensurate with the appropriate level of position that you should be at. Just to reiterate, we mentioned that there have been instances with law enforcement agencies where we observed that in 30-some years of service, we have officers who have retired at the level 1 position. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do is through this force structure, to be able to allow for proactive officers to take control of their own careers and to have a much more facilitative way of career advancement. Currently, the way it works is we have to have an opening, we have to announce it, we have to apply, we have to stratify it, or test, stratify, and then hold interviews. What this does is that it creates a system similar to the federal government and in some cases the military, where if you're coming in at the entry level, they allow you, as long as you get your time and grade, time and service, meet the qualification requirements for that particular level of job duty, that you're able to promote. So what it does is that it allows you to facilitate your career up to a level where you learn your full operating capabilities as a law enforcement officer. And then after that, what happens is that in the specialized areas like investigators, canine enforcement, certain specialties, or all specialties, you will have to compete. And then to reiterate again what we were talking about yesterday, we created 3 levels of trainee. Your training level 1 would be the person out of high school who needs to get the BALEA certification and the in-house 6-month law enforcement agency respective training. The level 2 training would be coming in if they have the basic law enforcement academy certificate. Your level 3 would be those who come in with 60 plus credits or a bachelor's or higher. So it allows for more attractiveness towards the position because you have your degree out of the way. In the future, that also helps you. If you have a degree, you're going to have to go through, of course, the initial career development in order to gain your core competencies. But then when you go for specialized areas, the education you receive and the training will come into play. So before we continue, does anybody have any questions? Because I want to just dive right into the summarized version of this.
Mr. Chair, Tony Blasovich, can you just for the record put remind or inform us, the members here, what was in yesterday's document and versus today's document, what was removed?
Okay, for the sake of those who were not able to make yesterday's meeting, and we'll also put the previous document back online. And then after today, we'll also put this one online. So what we did was, the Guam Police Department is considered the benchmark. So what I ended up doing was we took the benchmark positions for Guam Police Department because they have the most extensive levels of positions that almost incorporate the whole gamut from your entry level to your initial supervisory positions to your tactical operators to your managers and strategic thinkers. So throughout that, there's a whole lot of there's a number of positions that we're able to utilize, which assisted me in making sure that we fill the gaps. In addition to that, we also had 2 positions, specialized positions, like a level 1 specialized position that is outside the core competencies. So when you do your core competencies, and then you go into like, let's say, investigations, there's a level 1 and a level 2. And that falls right below the Sergeant 1 and the Sergeant 2 position. So those positions on up would be the ones where you would have to compete. Everything below that is you're competing just against yourself. So in inputting the information for every law enforcement officer position in the previous inception of this force structure, we took the general job specifications from the Guam Police Department for each position, and then we generalized in areas that looked like it was just police-centric, and we generalized the responsibilities, and then we incorporated into the force structure for every level. So there was much discussion yesterday, and at the end of the day, we agreed to generalize it so that it would allow more latitude for all other law enforcement entities who may not be police-centric in nature to be able to modify as necessary to their own needs. So hence the shorter version of it. The other thing we did was we went into the background and everything that you find between pages 1, 2, 3, all the way up until page 11 and 12. But the first 11 pages, actually, if you had no idea what we're talking about, this will give you a very good idea or informational background on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the mandate that we were tasked to accomplish. So if there are no questions, then maybe what we can do is just go through, starting on page 13. And for those of you who were here yesterday, you'll notice that it's a whole lot more succinct and much more summarized, because we removed the job specification information, which hopefully will benefit everybody who needs to use this for their organization. So when you go to page 13, it talks about the LEO Officer 1. So I'm going to generalize this. Really, it's the Law Enforcement Officer 1, which is the high school. Law Enforcement Officer 2, which is your BALEA certificate holder, and your basic Law Enforcement Officer trainee apprentice, which is the LEO 3, with your 60 credits or more. And really what I did was, it's just, the verbiage is pretty much the same. The difference is that one is high school, one says BALEA, and then the final one says 60 credits or more. Okay, do you guys see anything out there from any standpoint that we may want to look at or amend? I mean, it's pretty much cut and dry. I mean, I removed a lot of the technical things that might get in the way for some organizations to be able to comfortably move forward. And one of the things that we're hoping at accomplishing is that at the end of the day, before we continue on, we're going to have another set of requirements that basically identifies POCs, areas of responsibility, who does what, because the other thing that we discussed yesterday was Francis and Shane mentioned to me that in moving forward, the document in itself will help. However, there's a lot more work. So in other words, you just don't implement this and then in 2 weeks, everybody changes. What happens is that there's going to be a process, and it might take a year, it might take 2 years, it might even take more than that. So what happens is that we need to also put into the package when we submit it, what the respective law enforcement agencies are responsible for doing, what the collaboration effort is going to be between who, and normally that would entail like you having your training sections or people within your think tank take a look at the course structure, identify the core competencies and what are the requirements, the creation of career education training plans, creation of career development courses, certification, and then in line with that, we would have to work with our respective HR. In our case, it would be with the Department of Administration, and it's more like it's a collaboration. In other words, we can't rightly just say we're going to do this, because there might be some mandates or other regulations that may prohibit certain things. However, in talking with Shane and Francis from DOA, they're going to help us as much as possible to be able to create this product. And I think it's actually a good product, but I know that we can't just implement it tomorrow.
So, Chief, I'm sorry, so Francis Liswood from DOA.
Right.
So basically what we discussed yesterday is what you mentioned, right? One thing that my boss, Mr. Shane, suggested, which was to kind of make it more generalized, right?
Yes.
So, like for example, on page 7, there's the course structure, right? On proposed, and it says GPD proposed, training all the way down to police colonel. So, basically, from my understanding is that the suggestion was to kind of like, either take this out or kind of make it more clear that this is not, kind of like set in stone kind of thing. Because, what could happen is that, the legislature might, if this is what they're be turning into, the legislature might say, okay, this is like locked in.
I think what we can do in this particular case is
Right.
because we need to have an example.
Sure.
So maybe a caveat that basically says we utilize the model as a reference and that this does not constitute adoption of, but we need to come up with the verbiage.
I think what Francis is saying, and if I may, Tony Blas, Guam AG, is that once this goes to the legislature, it's gonna lock in to say police colonel, police major.
Right.
Not every agency has that title.
Right.
And so we have to make sure it's generalized where it indicates that this, if what you're saying is that what's on this, the police captain, major, and colonel, those are just an example, generalized, and they're not set in stone, that each agency has their own, position title.
Titles and,
Right.
Not only that, but also, we need also, as we know, GPD's input as well, in terms of like, okay,
Right.
is currently equal to WO 15 and so forth, right?
Right.
And that brings back the concern that Major Fire Chief from ARF, also Vice Chair for Post Commission, Raymond Tanoni. And that brings us to the concern of Major Chong's input about if we were to take them off their actual responsibility as where they're assigned and detail them to another, that again will actually affect their position as dean here. So yeah, I agree. If we can just have it in notation that what they're seeing here actually is just an example, not set in stone for all agencies to follow. It's just a guide.
Draft,
If I
that's a
may.
draft.
Christine Camacho Farron, Forestry Division Chief, Guam Department of Agriculture. Honestly, we do not carry these titles.
Exactly.
So I needed to make sure that, my understanding will be that, the position descriptions for this level, for the proposed levels, that our staff, because there are staff, they're forestry aides and foresters, but they now carry wildland firefighter and wildland fire arson investigators.
So they're converted in the positions.
Their PDQs have been updated
Right.
to have these new tasks, new duties.
Multitask.
But they are still technically their position, their title.
Right.
It's still forestry aide, which is so antiquated, and the forester. But they carry these duties. So that's why, thank you for bringing that up. But it's making sure that along the way, somewhere in here, that they have an opportunity for advancement.
Right.
And they're not left out because they're forestry.
Right.
And because of how vital this is and how, what do you call that? How to make sure that we avoid any like locked in statute. I think we need to get the other members from other agencies, we need to get their input in before we actually send something into the legislature. We can't just because we have a majority voting member here that we can vote and ratify, but I think we should get inputs from everybody before we actually move this forward, and it's just a matter of
I
requiring.
agree, Tony,
everybody
I agree with you.
Yeah.
We've been sending out notices
I know.
since the beginning, and to me, if you really, were interested in trying to make a difference and
Yeah.
to make changes, you would be giving me information, right? And regardless of, like in moving forward, the mandate still stands. And-
Yeah, just do
and so-
October first, yes, I understand.
So if we can, I'll see if we can maybe perhaps put off. I mean, I don't know if there's any technical violation if we don't.
We're gonna make a motion to, recess until we get everybody in here requirement, but I see the idea of getting a foundational tier level. You just gotta make sure that we don't lock in or lock out individual agencies like Department of Agriculture's arson
So
investigators.
let's use Department of Agriculture and go to, let's say, page 13, right?
I think Chief handed out comparison of the tier on Guam Police. versus the existing of DOD and also Guam Fire. I don't know if you guys had a copy of that.
No, this is.
And so his implementation was to have that, but to laterally get everybody in fit,
That'd
right?
be,
But that's
yeah.
the input that the chief is trying to
And
get.
that wouldn't take us very long at all. I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
it's,
Yeah.
So let's use your positions as an example. Do you know what the requirements are for your like forestry aid?
so forestry aid 1, that's entry level, just like all your level 1.
Entry level,
So it's high school diploma, GED.
that would fit into tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah. Do any of them, when they come in with a Balea certificate?
No, this is because they were
They-
just
they were done
recently,
forestry.
that's gonna be a whole new element to what we do. So we went from on-the-job training
Yeah.
with the US Forest Service, Wildland Fire Coordinating Group coming out here, training the staff,
Okay,
and the investigation training, because we saw a need and we needed to fill it.
okay. So your forestry aid, when they come in, they would be coming in as an LEO 1.
Yes.
When they graduate from their, you guys have an academy?
We do not. It's all, and so what I don't want is I don't want to be the block to a process that's already on. So we don't want to be left behind. So we don't have an official academy, but we do have certifications in place that should we reach out to the national training organization. We can implement it here, but here's the thing. When you train wildland fire on this national accreditation, that's training for stateside fires. We're effective here on Guam because we adapt to our conditions.
Okay.
And so.
So how long is
a lot of
the,
training for stuff we won't use.
so you have like 2 other fire entities here. You have the ARF and then you have the Guam Fire Department, and they also have fire academies. And so
Yeah.
is it the intent for agriculture to move towards having an academy, or at least linking with the current fire academies to see if you can put them in?
It would
Because
make-
that would bridge a lot of the gap. But I still don't see that as being an issue with the law enforcement officer structure. So if you came in with a high school certificate, you come in as an LEO 1. And then when you graduate, you would become an LEO 4, which is the beginning of the typical apprenticeship courses found in law enforcement. So if it takes your forestry aides like 2 or 3 years to become fully competent in the core competencies, it's kind of the same thing that this force structure does. It doesn't tie you in that you have to have an academy. It just, I mean, if you look at it, it just allows you consideration. So what if somebody came in to forestry and they had a degree? You wouldn't want to start them as an LEO 1. It would give you the latitude to bring them on as an LEO 3.
And that's the
based-
benefit of this structure.
Yes.
Because currently,
Yes.
we don't have that. If they have a degree and they apply for a forestry aid 1,
Mhm.
they are a forestry aid 1 with no other.
So that's the
so-
challenge that everybody else runs into. We have people who come in and they get picked up as a, and I'll just use the example, the LEO 1. So what this force structure does is that it delineates and allows for an incentive for people to, if I have a degree, I'm not gonna get picked up at the lower end of the scale. It's like the federal government, they have recruiting incentives if you're for GS 5, 7, or 9. And the reason why I know that is because in our agency, our officers who work for 2 years get picked up as a GS 9, and typically when you get picked up with the federal government, you start off as a GS 5. So transitioning that over to the government of Guam, which we don't currently have, we're looking at developing and incorporating that same type of process so that, it's like when I came in many years ago, and it was just high school and I had a degree, it's kind of like, I just settled. I said, okay, I'll take this, but man, I said, I don't know.
We elevate the quality of the candidates
Yes.
coming in. Like when I used to be a deputy sheriff, and as a sheriff, as a deputy, I had degrees. So I immediately was given 3% for every degree. It's like a 3% pay raise.
Right.
So automatically I had the 6% coming in as a new deputy. So I do truly appreciate that consideration, because I have 2 forestry A1s who have bachelor's degrees.
Yeah, so imagine if we transition over, that it would, I mean, they're probably already well into their career, but what this creates is that if there are opportunities for your agency to develop additional positions, you might find that, hey, you know, we need a supervisor 1 or a supervisor 2, and we don't have it because our agencies may be relatively small. It doesn't preclude you from developing it. Now, of course, you're not gonna have an LEO 15, like a police commander or a chief of customs, oversee a section of 10 people. You would probably, maybe at its highest, would have like a captain, maybe even a major, right?
It's what we would call our fire boss.
Right, so-
or, yeah, the
So
fire-
what I'm getting at is that this creates the opportunity for us to fix certain disparities that maybe you observe from your end in managing your part of the organization. Because I know that everybody else, we seem to have an agreement that there are certain gaps and there's certain challenges, and that in today's, with today's generation, it's different. It's a whole lot different from when we came in. Much of our guys are much more migratory now if they don't feel appreciated, and I know back in the day when many of us came in, it was like you put up with, you know, a lot of the indignities and just doing what you needed to do. However, you kind of feel like, when I grew up in my career, I said, you know, when I get to a position where I can, I want to make a difference. I don't want to see the status quo. I mean, does anybody here like the status quo, especially if it doesn't really work? We see gaps in our organization where there should be additional levels of responsibility inserted, but we don't. And so what this actually does is that it creates a standard by which you can say, well, you know, we have positions in our agency that much more equate to an LEO 8. And the positions that we have are relegated to an LEO 6. So in moving forward, yes, we would love to get all the input, and I just want to reiterate that we've been putting this out time and time again, and we actually put invitations, and we had formal letters going out identifying that this subcommittee is going to move forward. And I can't just readily sit back, but what I see in this product is that it should, at this particular stage, hopefully be close enough so that each organization can take a look at it and say, well, I can do this. And I know that there are differences between like the fire and conventional law enforcement. I mean, that's a given. But these are the things that we can actually spell out technically when we complete the package. So this is just like a skeleton to build on.
Yeah, I
Totally
see.
understood, it's just
It-
so making
that's
sure
all
the
it is.
language doesn't exclude.
And wherever
Yeah.
your positions
That's
are,
all.
wherever your positions are at, you can ladder it in.
The
So,
intersected investigation.
If I may, Attorney Blasi's office, so the bottom line is, I think what everybody's worried about, and Francis brought it up from Department of Administration, is that we don't want the legislature to lock us into a certain structure, because like the Attorney General's office, my investigators that I have there, they're not gonna be entry-level investigators. None of them will not hire them. My investigators have to come in, hit the ground running. So they'll be like maybe master level or journeyman level, like LEO's 6 or 7 level. And then we have our own like position description, what are the requirements, what experience you need, what training you need, what education you need if you need that. So that's the thing. For other agencies, they can start at training entry level. So it's clear, when we're looking at this, you get the proposed right here, it says training craftsman, and the structure. You have blank here where it says FLG, that I would imagine that's the what do you call that?
Pay grade.
The pay grade, so yeah, just everybody just so you aware, the FGHIL, just for the record, that means that's the pay grade, so.
So what I can do is like, in the areas where it actually mentions, like the current and proposed, I think that maybe we could even take that out so that it becomes even more general.
Yes.
Can it be or equivalent? I mean, that line, I'm sorry, just,
What do
Maybe
you,
you
what
would
page are you
take,
looking at, right?
Yeah, maybe Chief Antonio, maybe I can suggest, since I understand, maybe the confusion here is, we are actually afraid that we might be locked in with one of the benchmark being used. But what if, Chief, where you see the benchmark, but then each agency will actually come up with their position descriptions of all the positions they have and introduce it to the legislature from Guam Police, AG's office, ARF, GMD, as a whole. And that will solve Francis' concern that they all fit and slotted at these rank and files that is being proposed.
Well, that, of course, like how we discussed the other day, that's gonna take time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That should be something down the line,
That's why,
but
that's why we wanted.
No, that's what I'm saying. In that way, it won't lock in to identify that, yes, the benchmark is actually one police. But we don't have the wrong impression of the legislature saying, okay, but if they do this, all right, is this what the airport, is this what GPD, is this what? There's so many questions, and I guarantee it'll come right back, you know.
I actually propose something much simpler than that, because all you end up
Yes.
doing is locking in, again, very specific
Right.
Yes.
positions. Because right now I have forestry aides, and like I
Yeah.
said, antiquated position.
it can be changed.
It
Yeah.
might be a wildland firefighter,
Right.
for all we know, right?
Yeah.
It could change.
Right.
So all I'm really proposing is a more generic, placeholder, because what truly matters is what's in those special notes
Yeah.
that details what qualifications
yes.
are needed for
Okay.
each level. That's
Right.
it. It's far
So-
simpler
Yeah.
than everything else.
So
Like
what-
the police captain major, that's too specific. You need to
Yeah,
put
yeah,
something
I mean, the reason why it was there is because, remember, the initial, energy behind this was that, the Guam Police Department is the benchmark.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you don't identify the benchmark, then there's nothing to benchmark to.
Right.
But I think that we've gone around this enough times to maybe even, remove the police department, but just keep in mind that the underlying document does identify that the Guam Police Department is the benchmark.
No, like,
Well, the cameras we-
journeyman, grassroots master, those are pretty general.
Yes, yes, so like this one is more like gee whiz information, and I think, yeah, the concern is that if it goes and the legislature adopts it in its entirety, that this thing will lock us in.
Yeah.
However, I think that, the way I see it, that even if you put this in, but like what Francis says, if you put it in the details as part of the package that's being submitted, as part of like the do-outs, that every agency is to develop in line with the force structure, this, that, and the other, and that the Department of Administration will conduct its, a review to identify the knowledge, the know-how, problem solving, and to determine where they would lie. And let's say, Ms. Christine, you're saying that you're looking at maybe changing from, forestry aide into a firefighter or whatever the position is.
Wildlife.
It doesn't disallow you from doing that.
Yes.
This has no bearing really on, if I wanted to create like canine enforcement officer ones and twos, this would not do it. The generalism is really found on, starting on the page where we talk about the LEO
They're all
one.
broken down.
Yeah,
And
that's why I was saying, let's go through the LEO 1 through 15, and if you see anything there that says, well, I don't think that fits us, then we can address it. But, I'm gonna do one more review, and I'm thinking that it probably would not hurt to remove, the references in these, tables. Maybe even just remove the tables altogether. That talk about the Guam Police Department, but
Yeah.
it was only because, like I said, we needed
They were the
benchmarks.
models,
And so everybody needs to understand that, there had to be some rhyme and reason and logic in how we determine where positions fell in relation to the force structure.
And that's eternalized, and you said it'll be eternalized in the document, by
Yeah.
thinking that was the benchmark, so.
Yes,
We don't
so
need to
I will look at it one more time. I think that if I remove it and I'm gonna read it, my challenge is that I've been involved with this thing for months, And, like when you're reading something, sometimes your mind is filling the gap. So I might need to like maybe take it out and ask you guys to take a review and see, because it's like fresh eyes, if it makes sense. Because if it makes sense, without this, then it solves the issue or the concern that everybody has.
What would we suggest, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, like trying to do a way to come up with like more generic terminologies? Instead of police lieutenant, would that be like a police management level 1 or something, or?
We already took care of that,
Yeah.
Tony. It's actually, when you look at the tier, if you look at the.
Yeah, I know, but I see it here in this table now.
No, right, so
That's-
but that also goes back to the benchmark. So what I'm saying is that when you look at the different color codes, right?
Yeah.
Like supervisory, like you can say supervisory level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Managerial level 1, 2, 3, 4. Stuff like that, but I'm thinking altogether, just remove all these little tables that you see, that explain, in relation to the Guam Police Department benchmarks.
Right.
As I was saying, if I remove it, maybe it'll just make more sense.
Yes.
And
I
Chief,
think it doesn't get locked in.
yeah, the suggestion yesterday to umbrella the whole thing, even in the, Guam Fire and, our forestry, AG's office, instead of using the language law enforcement to public safety, the convenience as an umbrella.
Yeah,
discussion yesterday.
we had some
That's a law.
discussion yesterday on, because the law enforcement force structure is mandated through, public law, right? And the public law,
It's a law
actually-
enforcement infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Says
use
that.
it.
Yeah, so the terminology, we could try and generalize it, but really the law mandates to create a law enforcement general force leadership structure tier. It's in the law. So
And we can actually have it amended,
Like this is great. This is
Very
easy.
generalized.
Oh, yes.
General,
General.
great, you have this, and then you just take that piece.
why don't I look at that
Put it in.
and we'll see, and,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I, David Feisen from UIA, and we have the same challenges also, and we're literally anticipating that we're working our way up, but this is a great start, and painting the picture of us literally all together as a whole, we're trying to just say that, yes, we're gonna utilize a car as law enforcement officers. Let's generalize it as, we all can operate a vehicle, not a specific, you have to use a Toyota Tacoma that's a V6, that's a 4-door, leather-seated, 4-wheel drive with 18-inch, then that's when we're being too meticulous, that's now locking us down, that I only utilize a sedan versus that. So I think you are on the right track, Chief, Mr. Chair, and I think we're all there. We don't want to be locked to a corner, and that's one of the things that's what I'm worried about also when I break down from my YSWA, who's a youth service worker without a single correction or officer, but they do utilize the entry level 1 with degrees across the board to our supervisors. So that's where we're locked in, and we found something as simple as our position
Yeah,
descriptions.
and then you're gonna force them in the position.
Right, and those are the challenges we all face as a whole, and I know I'm not alone on that one, where we all face with that, where we can work that, following that lead, that we're going into
Okay.
where we're not using, we see where you got the benchmark, we see the current status of GPD, and we see the proposed, but the focus that you want us to do is literally look at the structure as well as the pay grade down to the LEO 1 to 15, so now I associate that with the current status of the current and the proposed that we're looking at as a whole. So that's.
no, and I understand, and I appreciate the feedback, and so anything that we can do to either streamline or make it much more efficient, I've got no issues.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that because we're utilizing, again, the benchmark, that you need to identify it. But I think we've been involved in this thing for enough time that if we remove it, we should be okay. So I'll look at maybe even generalizing it so that it doesn't use police titles in those pages. But at the end of the day, if it needs to be removed, I'll go ahead and remove it. So I will do that today. And then by the time we get to our meeting in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
we could discuss it, either that or we propose.
Whatever
another
changes you may
extension.
request, if you could send it out to us so we can also.
Yes, yes. Once I'm done, I'll send it out. So I'm gonna send you this copy, and then I'll send you out, the revised copy after today. Okay? So if you don't see anything on, what page are we on?
Page
we're on page
13.
13.
Yes.
Then we'll go to, the next tier. So we just finished with the entry level tier. Now we're going into the career ladder tier. This is the tier when once you graduate and you get picked up, you start learning about your core competencies and getting the additional certifications. And this is where like law enforcement agencies like the police department and customs conduct an apprenticeship. And this doesn't preclude any other agency from trying to establish an apprenticeship or some kind of program similar to an apprenticeship. But what this does is that it creates opportunities for once you meet certain levels of competencies, like you got your basic competency, and then you get your expert and your institutional knowledge guy. So it's like it allows for all these different increased levels. In other words, I can look at a part and I can tell you that that's a part. The guy who's like super technical will say, I know what that part does, I know why it does it, I know where it goes and what impacts it has. That's the difference. So what I'm hoping to accomplish is that as you progress in your career, it's an incentive for you to say, well, you know what, I know that if I complete my career development course in level 1, and I'm in time and grade, time and service, I'll go to the next tier, next level. And then, of course, there's another development course that you do at your own pace. And when we query you, it's like, hey, so Vince, what does this part do? And it's like, if I'm able to articulate what it does, why it does, where it does, as opposed to just, well, I know that's a part that fits there. It says, what does it do? I don't know. Then you know that I'm not ready. So what this does is that it takes into consideration your capability to learn and adapt.
Jeez, sorry.
Francis.
So regards to the, for example, LEO 3, right, versus college credits / bachelor's degree, or anything with the college credits suggestion is maybe kind of make it again more generalized, because right now you don't want to get locked in like this is 60 credits, maybe say something like LEO plus college credits or something.
College credits, yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines.
But
And then that's something that we can
Modify later on.
Yeah.
but you need to, because do all law enforcement entities, inclusive of like the fire department, need a basic law enforcement academy certificate?
Oh, yeah,
No,
okay, so it's fine then, so then we can remove that as well then.
Yeah,
That's.
because I was about to say that we don't do the Belaya, we don't have the college credit.
Okay.
I have a pro.
So maybe
service.
or equivalent, or.
And that was the word I wanted to use.
Caveat at
What
the end.
does the fire department use to?
We actually use pro board certification. I send my people a final. It's not being taught here, and that's why, under the entity umbrella, under the Part 139 for the airport.
What fire, did they go to a fire
Academy here.
So we got, okay, just so we see what we have your board, right?
Right.
You got the fire academy, we got the Balea, right? So what is these three areas, what is this called?
How do you make it more generic?
Yeah, more generic, that's my idea.
So, like, let's go back to page 13.
Yes.
Where it says, the law enforcement officer 2, and it says basic law enforcement academy certificate or appropriate equivalent, would that suffice?
Equivalent certifications.
Yeah, that's okay. Then it makes it more general.
Or, yeah.
More
generic.
friendlier and understanding.
Agency appropriate.
Or agency appropriate certificate.
Or something like that, is that good, agency or department, division, I don't know.
And don't get me wrong, I just wanted to elaborate with Chris, Ms. Farron, that when the chief was talking about a certificate for entry, that it needs something to divert to your position. Don't have a CPA certificate and you're actually a forestry firefighter, it's not gonna apply. And that's fairness to all. just like certificates for certifications.
Yeah.
If you're a law enforcement, you have a Balea, you got a CJ, then that can apply. But if you have an accountant, and it's not even in your job, forte, I don't think we can apply the degree that actually went on. Because, it has nothing to do with your job description. I'm just reminding everybody.
That's at a bigger picture again. I think we're painting that, and I gladly see that where we're looking at a whole lot of basic training from the military federal side. So everybody has to literally go to basic training no matter what branch it is.
Right.
And be qualified to be a service member, not a soldier, not a Marine, not a sailor. Everybody needs to be a service member, which is a law enforcement officer, and finish that basic training requirement. Como Malagua, when you go to another branch, hey, your AIT, your advanced, it's not specific for us. So como you qualify for your post-certified for DYA, congratulations, these are the requirements. You're a DYA, LEO4, but you want to do a lateral transfer to R for our customs. You're only at that entry level, but you don't yet have the training that makes you fit into that.
So you have to start from
So
the
you have
bottom.
to start from the bottom
Yes.
or get those qualifications to fall in. So it's not as simple as that before we jump too far. And that's what we're looking at from a macro
Right.
level. Identify something as simple as MOSQ across the board.
Yeah.
And in general, that acronym is to be specified to be qualified for the position if you transfer. And that's the point that you were bringing up,
Yes.
that we're all seeing, that we all want to solidify, but I think we're a ways back where the crawl, walk, and run phase that you brought up. We're still at the crawl, almost at the walk phase.
But I think that in relation to the example you just gave, right,
Yeah.
like let's say, I've been in customs and I wanted to move over to the police department. It's like the military. I'll give you the same example I used a while ago, that basically, if you're in the military and you move over to another branch, oftentimes what they do is that they'll have you go through the MOS qualification.
A Q course.
If you move from like Air Force into the Army, they send you to the scope. They don't demote you. They don't say we're gonna bring you down to an E1 level.
No.
Whatever your rank was at the time is that you're gonna have to go through the training requirements in order to get qualified. So in this particular case, right, in law enforcement, translating it to law enforcement is that if you did the same thing here, we're not gonna demote you down and say you're gonna have to go through the apprenticeship course, therefore, we're gonna have to drop you down to an LEO4 when you're in LEO8. Because all that is that it's qualification, training requirements that just need to be met. So, like I said, in moving forward, we will, and I think, Ms. Christine, we decided that on page 13, where it says Basic Law Enforcement Academy Certificate, we were talking about generalizing it or saying agency appropriate certificate or something of that nature to not disallow for other organizations, like if you said like it's a fire certification. And you don't necessarily need to get a Basic Law Enforcement Academy certificate, that it technically removes you from qualifying.
That's excellent, thank you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a good point, Francis, thank you.
What about I'm sorry, Tony Blossing at HE's office. What about the pay grade? Is that something that we need to generalize or just keep it the way you have it on the table?
So for the purposes of pay grade, what I did was I just used the current LEO pay grade that was passed in
So
January.
then again, are we gonna run the risk of that being locked in as the pay grade that we're gonna use, or?
Well,
No, we're just going to probably remove the references like the IL1, whatever. I'll make a note of that too.
Yeah, I think it's fine because, in terms of the way it is now, you put IL, whatever is equivalent to LEO 5.
Yeah.
So what the chairperson is saying is to take that out. So it's just the LEO 1, 2.
I think it makes more sense, because the thing, the Attorney General, one of the things he's always looking at is the budget. I mean, we're gonna hire those people, do we have money to do that, right?
Yeah.
So let's not lock anybody in, let's keep it generalized.
Not just hiring, but the promotional process that equivalent to their service time.
Right.
On a latter scale, that's where the funding, do we have the funds?
Do we need to put in some kind of generic wording that the pay scale
Yeah.
be commensurate or?
Because if you have if you have 20 that came on board at the same time, you're gonna have a problem because, you know, you're gonna look at, okay, who's actually coming to work and all, you're looking at all of this to make sure you're not called to civil service for any bureaucracy that actually is gonna be challenged. So that's where I'm leading to. I know we're laddering up, but then at the same token, we gotta be careful how we're establishing it, because then you're gonna have your hands tied, where you have one opening, but you got 20 of these employees, airport police guys that came in the same time. How are you gonna compensate the other 19? And it's hard, it's really hard.
Unless you want to put in a pay grade section, these are examples of the pay grade or pay scale for this position here.
Yeah.
I think if you just remove any reference to the pay scale, it's very logical. In other words, if you're coming in as an LEO 1, you're at the bottom, you're at the,
somewhere.
whatever Department of Administration or the appropriate HR says.
Right.
You fall into.
It's the entry level for that type of a career.
I just put a note to
Yeah.
look at removing any reference to the current pay schedule. But it was more or less, like I said,
It's
so
a
people can understand.
comparison, yes.
Yeah, but I think if you don't use it, we can still, I mean, it's pretty much
It's pretty much
what's your
given,
lowest
you know.
number and what's your highest.
Yeah,
number.
it's pretty much given that if you're entry level, you're gonna make less than
Yeah, you're gonna start from,
manager,
yeah, start from first step
or
and work your
manager.
way back up.
Okay, got that. Okay, now, page 15. So what this force structure tier is this is the start of your non-competitive career ladder. To reiterate, the federal government utilizes the career ladder so that when you come in, you, as appropriate, if you get the certain certifications and probably knowledge, education, and experience, you can move from what they call a GS5 to a 7 to a 9. And you're actually promotable all the way up, I think, until GS12. Currently, the government of Guam does not have that capability to do so. So this would help to facilitate a process that needs to be developed, whereby we can incorporate that as part of an incentive. So LEO 4 is your start apprentice. Competency level is basic. And if there's anything in here that you see that comes out, and once again, I'm going to say that I'm going to go through and remove references like the police officer. I see one there already.
DO1?
Yeah. And then I'll send everything out. So if you see anything, let me know. Otherwise, this one is kind of cut and dry with the exception of the police reference. And then the next page is your LEO 5, the journeyman. So you notice the difference, the apprentice, and then the next level is journeyman. And then to continue on to page 17, that's your craftsman. And then there's a LEO 7 that, like I said, will remove any reference to the police officer position. And the LEO 7 is actually your master craftsman or your full performance level. That's the example I used earlier where you come up to me as a LEO 4 and you ask me, he says, okay, so what does this part do? I don't know, I know what it is, but here in the LEO 7 position, I can tell you what it does, why it does it, where it does it, what impacts does it have, and this is basically, I'm the super mechanic, or what did you say, it's not the Toyota, it's
Not
just a
the
regular
Tacoma.
sedan, right?
Right, it's the
Yeah.
sedan.
No, it's a Prius.
So, you know, like, so when you get into specialized positions, then that's the next page. Since I'm already talking about it, go to page 19. So like, let's say I'll use the Prius. The Prius deals with a lot of electrical, technical, and technological advancements that it's not just a regular mechanic. Now you need to have specialized training. So level 1 is your LEO 8, right? And then your LEO 9 is your super mechanic specialty. Okay, so if you see anything, let me know. Otherwise, I know what I need to do with these positions. Moving on to page 21, that will be your law enforcement officer 10, and I am going to, so question, would it be okay to use like the verbiage as you see here, like the GPD benchmark, police sergeant 1? Because all it's saying is that it's a benchmark. It's not saying that it's the actual position. Or do you think that we should just take it out?
If you want to leave it in, you gotta explain maybe in the beginning what benchmark means.
Mhm.
It's just used as a reference or something.
It actually is mentioned at the beginning.
Is it?
Yeah,
Sorry, I
it's in there. It talks about benchmarks used.
The only one I have, Mr. Chair, David
Yes.
Hudson from UA again, is some of the LEOs have a GPD that is non-used, that's the benchmark. So how do we justify those LEO, for example, LEO 9,
Mhm.
where the benchmark that we're alluding to, there's none used from that department. So how do we justify within that for those? Simply, what's my question?
See, like me, right, on our,
Tell
she
me
went
what
on
you
the art. The language specialized field, it starts at the apprenticeship on art, okay? We send them through a training, and it becomes live fire, that's their specialized field. Guam Fire and Forestry, don't do those, and it's actually a requirement that we do that. And so, that's where the language, I will use for art, and I'm getting to that, Dave. We're actually fitted art, it actually starts from the very first rank, and that's the firefighter 1, specialized field. That's I'm speaking on the behalf of art. That's the specialty that they need to undergo. And if they don't, they cannot perform out on their own.
Tony, page 3. It's just one simple sentence.
Yes, small one. On the page 3.
This is models used.
What section here?
Page 3,
First
top
paragraph.
of the page,
Top.
models used.
Oh, models used.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we need to explain further, but.
Just a small
I
paragraph.
think because there is consistency when you just look at, let's like 13. When you look at 13, you have LEO 1, you have GPD benchmark, police training, and in parentheses, it's high school diploma / GED. You gave a sort of an explanation that you're reminding us that it's a GPD benchmark. That's fine.
And all it is
But you
it's a
have-
benchmark.
And you have like the high school diploma / GED. You can go to your other ones, you have
Yeah.
similar still,
Okay.
college credit.
On the very,
Left it
I'll come
out,
out with a little disclaimer or something.
and it'll be consistent with how you've introduced every other.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
For all the positions laddering up.
Yeah, and
That's
it's,
all.
it's a document consistency thing.
Yeah, like page 3, as it's
Okay.
written on page.
It's a reference or standard that's used for comparison purposes. something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
16,
Comparison.
17.
I'm not a set of stone. I don't know what the word is.
Not
We're gonna have to,
set,
like,
it's
cut and
just set
paste,
aside,
a
yeah.
lot of
Just
that.
take it and just put it on all the positions on the end.
It's just 15, 16, and 17.
Okay.
I think if she just utilize cut and paste, first paragraph on page 3. This force structure utilizes the Guam Police Department Police Officer Position Series as the benchmark to create this force.
And it's
structure.
used for comparison
Yes.
purposes only.
And not to basically.
Not to say we're actually.
Not to dictate that this will be used, shall be used
Right.
by, all participating agencies or the different law enforcement agencies, something
All
like
public safety,
that. Yeah, something like that, right?
Okay.
Just pull out your.
Cut and paste.
It's like a watermark.
Yeah. And that's the
Tony-
one that people don't really look at, but.
Can I just say something here? This could have been, like Chip was saying,
Yeah.
could have been resolved if
If everybody showed up,
everybody showed up.
and one of them did show up.
Yeah.
We only just qualified the come to
I was
the table,
volunteering.
so.
Yeah.
Actually, I invited, you know, so
So I,
that you're part of,
yeah, Sherman, I think we got a lot of progress
Yes.
going forward, so I think we can.
for
do
2
this.
days.
I know we can do this, I know we can
Yes,
make the
we
deadline,
can.
it's just,
Okay,
so
so,
let's just.
so we already have a caveat that needs to be placed at every
Right.
area that makes a reference to the
Yes.
need to be benchmarked.
Yeah.
Right.
So in moving forward then, do you see anything on page, we're already at, what are we at, Elio, 9
20
or 10?
Yeah.
21.
Yeah, only
21.
21, 10.
We're at 21.
Leo 10.
So the area in yellow was something that I highlighted yesterday, because what it does is that it lets everybody know that you're transitioning, because now you learn your core competencies, and then people became specialized in certain areas, like the Prius mechanic, but then now you want to become the shop leader. So this is what this is talking about. It's like a first line supervisory person who's gonna like take charge of the shop when the boss says, hey, I'm gonna go off doing this. Okay, that's what
If
we
you look at page 21, the yellow there, Francis, your attention please on this one where it says, must complete government Guam basic supervisory course. Is that also a mandate by DOA?
Sorry, where are you at?
On competency level supervisor, the yellow part of page 21,
Okay, go ahead.
on line 3. It says government of Guam, or it starts at line 2 at the end, officers must complete the government
Do the
of Guam
government of
basic.
Guam basic supervisory course, please.
So what?
These are the
I'm saying, is that
officers.
something that is required to be a supervisor?
Not at this, not at this time.
So I think we should, this is something
Yeah,
that's
we-
locking people in.
Is this offered?
Yes,
Yes, it is offered, there's supervising courses that are offered,
Is
but
it
it's
like on
not,
a DOA?
but it's not a requirement.
They send out a training calendar.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So when you see it,
Quarterly.
Get Francis's number so you can send him the training calendar.
The quarterly.
But see, this locks me, this
Yeah,
locks
it
me.
looks,
Right, right,
yeah.
so instead of saying that, why don't we say officers may be required, because I don't want to put somebody in there who has no
Yeah.
knowledge of basic
Maybe required,
supervisory.
I don't know, what do you folks think?
Yeah, because it's an allowance, it's not a requirement.
I mean, even if you're.
Or equivalent.
Yeah.
Meaning,
But,
like,
yeah.
let's say it's not DOA that offers it, but let's say the post commission's got something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Exactly.
fine.
yeah, exactly.
This might be a typo. I know,
So it's supposed to
You got a
be-
typo?
the first paragraph regarding the number of credits.
Oh.
In your first paragraph towards the end, second to the end, 30 credits versus the one that's highlighted 60.
On page,
21. Same, Leo.
It's the first paragraph.
If you look at the first paragraph,
It says 30 credits, and then the second paragraph says 60 credits.
Right.
just over.
oh, okay, I see.
So it's supposed to say 60, right?
No, we'll just remove that.
Again,
Why
we
don't I
talked-
just,
about
Just
this
say
this
credit,
portion here,
just-
because it
yeah.
already talks about
College credit,
Yeah,
that's
30
all.
college credits.
Yeah.
Which-
How about like appropriate
Yeah.
college credits?
Just remove it.
because it's already required.
Because you
Oh,
could-
yeah, appropriate.
Appropriate
Because
college
you
credit.
could have 3 credits versus 60 and, you know.
Okay,
Yeah, so if you say appropriate credits, agency could
Like,
say the
yeah,
appropriate
maybe
college
30
credits
credits
would
could
be
be in-
60, yeah.
yeah,
Arts and music or something.
Yeah.
appropriate, okay.
Appropriate.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's what I was alluding to about your, you know, your.
So you're talking
your
about,
courses.
No, I mean, you know,
Specifically,
Underwater.
I have no-
like,
I have no-
like
that's
example, I
agree.
mean, our former director, Tony Lamarena, his bachelor's degree was in fine arts. You know, music and arts,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but
sometimes you need.
it was a little different. It's just a, it was just a
Sometimes you
little
feel
different.
like a-
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good catch, Dave.
Yeah.
That's what made your, I saw that.
So I think it.
I just have a question in regards to the credits, if I may, if I send again
Sure.
from DYA. From experience, though, we're gonna accept something as basic as foreign credits, because we do have a lot of, you were mentioning earlier that, from other
Explain to me
foreign
by,
countries.
what you mean by foreign.
If somebody comes in, applies in Guam and applies with us, but they have a degree from the Republic of Philippines, no longer PI, but it's the Republic of the Philippines.
That's
How-
not something I can answer. but
Yeah, we have to say it has to be accredited from,
It has to be accredited.
that's exactly
from,
where I'm leading to.
It has to be
Because
recognized.
anyone nowadays can even go to social media and literally
Yes.
go on school and say,
That's what I was saying.
So we have to make sure that we assess to determine that it's an ethical credit.
It's a recognized credit by DOA,
Okay.
GCC, and UOG.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me read.
And then the
something.
post commission actually needs to validate that through the entities of the college institute in Guam.
Let me
And
read
it's literally from experience, I had one individual who had several degrees, and when they applied, and I actually recommended that they don't apply, they can start their own business if they have a JD. They have also a dentist, a degree in dentistry as well as, so I kind of like, maybe this is not for you because you sound highly educated, even though it's from another country that's not even like.
Okay, so to answer your question,
Qualified.
in the
Yeah.
previous version of what we are presenting here, in one area, it's the LEO 10, it talks about a caveat, it says 2 years of experience in the rank of LEO 7 or equivalent.
Okay.
And then it talks about 45 semester hours of college credits from a nationally recognized / accredited institution.
Okay.
And that's the stuff that I could probably put in areas
An
where,
asterisk.
generally speaking,
Asterisk.
yeah. Okay,
And,
because in all fairness to people that,
Yeah.
yeah, you may have gotten your degree, but if we can't
Yes.
verify the authenticity and that, you know, it's like, we're trying to ensure that we get the best quality. I mean,
True.
for example, I could actually print out a certificate and say I went to this. So I'm thinking we stick to the verbiage that was actually put out by the Department of Administration, which is what I just read. It should be able to, it should suffice.
Any suggestions, Officer? Lieutenant Regis?
Just okay, this is my second day, so I'm
You're
just
trying
soaking it
to
up.
sink yourself in.
So you're gonna be the SME when it goes back to doing all this incorporating, right?
Yes.
I got you now.
I got just one question. So with the pay grade, just see, our chief is at the same letter grade as a captain at GPD.
Mhm.
If this thing goes through, would he go up another level?
That remains to be seen, because that's not for us to determine, it's more like, you have to remember that, one of the things that we're working on is, yeah, we have these little, projects that we're working on. Now, for me, it's not up to the post commission, it's more or less like if it goes through, I think there would have to be collaboration between the airport authority and, the respective HR to make that determination. But, you know, if they fit the criteria, right, and they're at that strategic level, doing all these things on behalf of the Guam International Airport Authority, right, then, you know, then they fit right. Yes.
So he essentially could meet up with the chief of police's.
Yes,
Don't quote me on that,
Yeah.
but because what I'm getting at is that, in many organizations, like the LEO 15 is like the head of the organization, right? Normally, it's the agency, right? And underneath the agency, you have divisions or sections. So that's where, little, distinctions either have to be, or exceptions to the rule have to be identified. Meaning, you know, because there's a lot more authority and that we're responsible for this jurisdiction, then of course, obviously, that I can see. But it's not for me to determine. It's more or less like the HR and maybe even your board to be able to. But I think that we can put something in that maybe helps to delineate and put qualifications as to what qualifies as meeting an LEO 15, what qualifies as meeting a 14. But you don't want to have small organizations that only have like 15 people with an LEO 15 overseeing it. It's more like in the area of like maybe even the next level down, which would be the LEO 14 or the 13. Can you see what I'm saying? Because if you have an organization of 5 people and my authority is like at the LEO 15, and all I'm doing is I'm really just running the shift, then that doesn't equate. So these are the little things that have to be fleshed out in moving forward.
And it's up to each agency to determine that, to their respective HR and or
Yeah,
division head.
but we have to probably, as a commission, come up and work with our respective HR departments to ensure that we're not creating an entity with like the wrong size organization. it's backwards. If you have all these chiefs at the top and then you have like two at the bottom,
Two Indians.
you know what I mean? So it's gotta be appropriate, like your leader, and then you got like two sub-leaders, and then everybody else like worker bees.
An organizational chart,
Yes, so,
for sake. Okay.
but that's a good point. Okay, so, going to this, page 21, anything else?
So we're removing the number, right? from
We're
college
removing
graduates,
the
yeah.
number, and we're just saying, what did we say, appropriate?
Appropriate college
College
credits?
credit.
They will ask what's the appropriate college credit.
I think it's in the first paragraph.
Yeah.
I think you need to remove also or modify the, complete the basic
Yeah.
supervisory course.
I put, may be required to complete a government of Guam basic supervisory course or equivalent.
How about if you just leave a government, let's say a supervisory course, supervisory or leadership course, something like that? Leave it open.
Yeah,
Or general, yeah.
Well, I was trying to like make sure that like when, you know, like the DOA is kind of like the entity for many of the organizations to provide, basic supervisory.
I don't know, Francis, what do you think?
Yeah,
On the supervisory, should we leave it government Guam?
I guess that also leads to like, you know, how post is supposed to, come up with like.
Develop.
Certification courses, right?
So post, yeah, it does,
So-
yeah.
So why don't we just remove government of Guam basic, and the government of Guam, you take that out basically and just say appropriate.
Well,
Supervisory
the
course.
government of Guam piece, like, used because it's already a packaged training that we already have.
Yeah, but the challenge that I see though with the Department of Administration is that it's hard to, like, let's say, several hundred people need it.
Okay, so it's
And
only
the
offer it
government
like.
is only able to offer it like 3 times in a.
So what about like a post
That's a good
approved?
point.
A post
Post requirement.
post approved or something.
Yeah.
Just like in the, you know, we say
Okay.
you're gonna water it down, because
Yeah, 'cause
each director will have a different definition of
Yeah.
what supervisory training is.
I
One will
think
say,
our
oh,
investors,
just,
the post can actually
Yeah.
determine.
just give them 2 hours, the other one said, no, it's 8 hours, and,
Yeah,
but if we do, let's say DOC, for example, we have under the National Institute of Corrections.
Right.
Yeah.
There's online
Yeah.
training courses there, and let's say,
Yeah.
I bring that to the post commission, says, hey, we want our supervisors to create the, either the NIC or the American Jail Association or whatever,
Okay,
approved, right?
Yeah.
And I give it to you guys and say, this is the curriculum, this is the syllabus, this is everything. And the post commission
Post commission, yes,
says,
this
that's a reasonable for your nature of your job, and we
Right.
approve that training.
Yeah.
Then my officers would have a better idea of what to do, because your training for your
same thing,
supervisor
we
may
have
be
the
different.
same.
Online.
Yeah, like the agriculture would have a training in the States from another, you know,
Institute,
agriculture.
yeah.
All of it comes under the.
As long as it's
Guam
recognized,
group,
Yeah.
And so those packages are already
And,
there.
yeah, and Christine, that leads, major, that leads back to what Chief was actually saying.
Yeah.
As long as it's nationally registered,
Yeah.
you know, equivalent to.
Nationally recognized.
And recognized here.
Or accredited.
yeah,
The difference between the
so
two
we'll make
are-
sure that that's inserted.
Yeah, so make sure it's general as possible.
Yeah,
Same thing goes for page 22, if there's anything in there that is
Same.
repetitive from the first page, we will make the amendment, but I'm looking at it now. And of course, the appropriate
college
caveats
credit.
will be there.
Yes.
yeah, college credit, Chief. Leo 11 on the top, first paragraph. I mean, yeah,
I got it.
appropriate, okay?
It's like this one caveat that keeps repeating with the asterisk, it says, please note for career progression, especially for positions of LEO 10 or higher. Officers are encouraged to complete college courses in the areas of public, police science, criminal justice
Yeah.
administration, or closely related fields or disciplines, and review the minimum experience and training requirements of the position. So that's a caveat that keeps repeating, because what it does is that reinforces people when they're moving in their career that, you
Yeah,
know,
this,
you should.
this statement is actually, you can find probably, it's on the GPD position descriptions.
Yeah.
So if
it
you go to
is.
the GPD one, this particular statement
Yes.
is on almost all of them, I believe. It just tells the officer in the future, you may qualify for this, but in the future, you need to make sure you prepare for the
And I
next
think
level.
that's actually a proactive, that's actually good for the agency, because it's like, you know, of course you have, individuals who are happy being a LEO, an officer one, but then you have many people out there who are not satisfied with just being an officer one, and they ask themselves, what can I do? So this is intended to allow to facilitate that. Right now, we don't really have any real mentorship programs, we don't have any real program that helps us to move people in crossing the gap to learn institutional knowledge. It's kind of like, I'm just an officer one, that's beyond my capability, I'm not gonna do it. But then for those guys who are saying, I need to know this, because in a few years, many of us we're ready to leave the agency, right? So you don't want to see a situation where there's a massive institutional knowledge drain, and then people are left like, what do I do? How do I fix the Prius?
The other thing again that I like about this is, honestly, it will actually prohibit a flow of applicants.
Yeah.
It will actually say, okay, you know that you're not, as you read this, you don't qualify. Maybe give it your best or give it a shot, but if you don't have this,
Good filter.
I'm sorry, you got one more year or you need to present yourself and take this course to qualify to apply. So it is a good thing. That's a lot. Glad I'm gonna retire pretty soon.
But you're right on, you're zeroed in on that,
Yeah.
Vice Chair,
Yeah.
that it's a good filter to allow
Yes.
everybody to know their place.
Yeah.
And that's literally the structure that.
This is a very good thing.
Okay, moving on to 23.
Safety chief, first,
Yeah. So
75 costs
really, it's
for-
just to make sure that, or appropriate, and then also
Yeah.
that a caveat
Yeah.
or equivalent knowledge, which
Yes.
is something that we brought up yesterday. You don't want to restrict it to just, like, if you don't have the education, then
Right.
you're out.
Or equivalent.
Yeah. Then we go now to page 24, which is the highest, level in the tier. And once again, anything that deals with the benchmark will have a caveat on it. Anything that deals with the education requirement will also have the appropriate caveat in there and the appropriate verbiage that I mentioned earlier. Anything?
looks good chief in this.
And then just keep in mind that really, as the higher you go in an organization, you really want to hold people's feet to the fire. You don't want somebody coming into an organization and they're supposed to be able to strategically say, there's a big chasm here, I need to cross it, but I'm not gonna do it. You need people who are going to say, I see a chasm, but I have a bunch of wood here, let me build something to cross the gap. So these are the things you need to have, like people with of course, the institutional knowledge, but people who want to make sure that, we're able to achieve. And a lot of the times, when you get to the level where we're at now, in this area, starting with LEO 13, 14, 15, is that, like Tony mentioned it earlier, like budget. Who does not have an issue with their budget? Who does not have enough funding? Who doesn't have enough personnel, equipment, supplies, vehicles? I mean, I can tell you that it's just part of dealing with running your organization. So really, from the 13, 14, and 15 level, you have to make sure that you don't just generally speak and say, okay, if you don't need this, then we're going to have a lot of or. It's kind of like we need to ensure that people, when they get into these positions, are going to appropriately take over when the leader on top of them leaves. So.
You notice on page 24, sir, Chair, you did use the verbiage appropriate college credits in CJ.
Okay. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just try to make sure that everything has got the general caveat statement, that's appropriate for the tier and the level and the position. But, okay, anything under LEO 14? Okay, we go to the last page, which is the LEO 15. And do you guys see anything? Otherwise, that kind of concludes the review. And then, for the sake of those that were not here the other day, like I said, I'm going to send you guys several documents. So the other document that we ended up taking out some pages following this were general competencies. And so these are, there's general and then there's also technical competencies. And then you can actually add additional competencies for your area. And I'll just read off like some of the competencies so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. So under general competencies, it talks about accountability, which is to hold yourself and others accountable for measurable, high quality, timely, cost-effective results. Agility, bends, stretches, twists, reach with body, arms, or legs. Depth perception, flexibility, leadership. So this was actually part of the initial draft. But the way I see it is that when we develop this thing and it goes before the legislature, we can probably include it as an addendum, but we've also put some verbiage that will also allow every agency to develop as they see fit.
Yeah, when you send it, can you send like this in Word also? Word?
Yes.
So we can work on
So
it.
that I can tweak it for my agency, because I do have competency for, again, from the National Institute of Corrections and the American Jail Association, and they have their own research they've done that talks about competencies for corrections warden, deputy warden, lieutenant, captain, and all that. So a lot of that what you see is here, and then there's just a few extra that they put
so that's
for
why I didn't want to like
corrections,
just limit.
inmate management, things like that.
Yeah, so I'll send everybody the Word document.
Because that's what I started doing yesterday. I just started crossing out GPD and putting DOC's rights in between to see where they would fit in.
I think with this too, Chair, I think after this, actually, we set this to the legislature. I think when each agency actually comes up with their own, plan of tiering their department, I think we need to go back down to the legislature and have it approved at the same time.
I mean, when you turn it in, it'll be like overall, but then there'll be all the chapter
This is
one.
DOC,
Chapter one would
right.
be GPD. Chapter two would be another agency. Chapter three is another agency, and so
Right, because we have our individual requirements or competencies to that. When we look back at page 27, I have a problem with saying must have completed a master's degree, but like may be required, because that again locks it in. Somebody who has a bachelor's degree actually can be very good.
Where you went?
15, page 27.
Which paragraph?
Second paragraph.
Second paragraph, second sentence.
Or, even the other positions, if you have like the word must in there, could reconsider it, maybe putting something like maybe required or something to that effect, not lock it in to a master's degree.
Okay, so this also goes along with the benchmark, so it's a
Yes,
good
yeah.
catch, because
Yeah.
what I did was I utilized the GPD benchmark.
Yes, again, GPD, and the GPD, I think, was locked in previous position.
Well, it
chiefs.
does say or demonstrate equivalent knowledge, experience, training, and education. So that kind of like
But the
softens-
mustard, yeah, the mustard.
Yeah, the word must.
I know, but it says must have completed or
But
Yeah.
still though.
demonstrate.
Yeah, this, it's still, I prefer.
Let me, I
More
marked the
generalized.
page, so
Yeah,
I'll see if I can soften it.
Yeah.
But you know, these are good catches.
yeah.
I do have, like a concern that was brought up, but I don't think it necessarily impacts, the, leadership structure tier. It was more like talking about, expediting of hiring and, what else? Transitioning from long shifts into like shorter shifts. But that's not something that I think we need to really discuss, but I will talk with the appropriate person, when we conclude the meeting. So, do you guys have any other inputs that you might want to consider? Otherwise, one of the things I'm gonna talk about is in moving forward, right? When this document is finally done, so then now we have a skeleton or a foundation to build on. So some of the things that Francis and Shane have brought to my attention was that in moving forward, we need to talk about identifying milestones and areas of responsibility, meaning every agency is going to be responsible for helping us to create their own respective positions in relation to the force structure, but in addition to that, we're looking at creating career education training plans. So that's going to take collaboration between, of course, the law enforcement agency and their appropriate HR, developing a career developmental course for each level, right? That would entail having your subject matter experts develop something in line with the personnel specialists, I'm thinking, to create guidebooks so that, you know, the requirements are there, they need it, they know, you know, like using the example, I know what this is, but I don't know where it goes or how it, you know, but at certain levels, you need to be able to understand and articulate that. We need to make sure that we're going to be constantly collaborating between like DOA, civil service, and respective law enforcement agencies to assist in like appropriately classifying your positions with the tiers, to develop job specifications. I also would like to see that we develop in line with this appropriate organization and functional charts that include the positions, and to identify your positions for consideration into where in the force structure the positions would lie.
Are you talking about existing positions or the creatively proposed positions, Chief?
I'm thinking like for right now, you will probably end up having to give me both, but the immediacy is that I need your current positions, but you don't close the door. If it were me and you gave me the opportunity, I'd say, I'm going to develop the positions to meet.
So to concur, we will submit the actual organizational chart and then the proposed organizational chart for the tier process.
Yeah. And then what else do I have?
And Chief, if I may ask, maybe we can send that out to all the commission members.
What I'll do is I'll go
Yeah.
through, and then maybe if everybody here can just also identify like if there's something that I might have missed. Because one of the things that we're gonna do in moving forward is that when this document gets approved, I'm thinking that they may just attach it to a law, and then it just says the legislature hereby adopts this, right? But we need to put in the marching orders in moving forward so that it'll say that, for example, in addition to this, each agency will be responsible for develop positions in relation to the force structure, collaborate with the Department of Administration to do this, collaborate with civil service to do that. Whatever these little points are the details. Because right now, this is just generally speaking, but there's a whole lot more work that needs to be done in moving forward. Because that way, at least if we get the law passed that says that we're gonna do it, you know, like 2 years down the line, let's say I'm retired, right? And then it's like people come in and they say, well, the law says that we need to do this, and then somebody else says, no, we don't need to do it, but it's spelled out in the law. It articulates that it needs to be done. And my concern is that sometimes when you don't put something in the law or a mandate, it won't get done. Sorry, okay. Anybody else have anything for me? Yes, no, just go down the line. Right.
I'm good.
No. Next question.
Is this like, I was gonna
Welcome,
share.
Ms. Christian.
I'm just gonna share training dates.
Okay. No, that's what we're here for.
Sorry. So, for the event, we're having our second phase of the wildland fire arson investigation training. So that's scheduled for November 14th through the 18th of this year. And there will be, it follows up with a workshop which I bring the chiefs, basically leadership. Because that becomes, we went through this training together, what's gonna get us on the ground? It's the follow-up which leads to the SOP that brings us all to the table. So that will be November 21 and 22nd. So I'll send out an invitation for the departments. So again, this is wildland arson investigation.
Ms. Christie, may I ask, are you guys in tandem with the USDA?
Are we what?
USDA.
Our funding comes from USDA Forest Service. And so all of the training is international and nationally recognized. So the trainers, the people that wrote the books, are the ones providing the training, coming in.
They're having a training up at the airport next week. And that's why I asked that.
Oh, for USDA?
Yes.
No, unless it's Forest Service, not necessarily.
Okay. Okay.
But that training, the first one we had GPD, GFD, DOD, forestry, and our conservation officers. So it's.
Okay. And you said November, right? Okay. Anton, any?
No, I'm sorry, no.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
We're good, UAE.
Not at this time, sir.
Okay, so in moving forward, we'll go ahead, I have some do-outs, I'll go through, review it, make the amendments, and if you see anything, I will send it in Word, and, if you see anything, after today, please email me, right away, or you can email, Bertha, because she's the one that's always sending everything out, and it's kind of like, it always gets filtered to me, so, either or.
That would be great, Chief, if you send it in Word so that we can inclusively attach the existing organizational chart and the proposed.
Or share drive. Share
Yeah.
drive, whatever works.
Well, I'll initially have it sent out as a Word, and then maybe what we can do is, like, if we find a lot of discrepancies, we can say, well, put it on the Word. But really, the intent really is like, this is a general document,
Yeah.
but then in moving forward, each agency is going to tailor certain aspects of it. In
So
line.
my intent is like, just a few pages with the correction side, everything else will stay the same.
Just an addition.
Just the correction side,
Okay, anyway, if we have no further comments, I would like to thank everybody for showing up. I appreciate everybody being here and conducting this review. We're one step closer to submitting it, and we will be discussing this further probably at our next post meeting. If necessary, we may want to call for one more meeting, but that remains to be seen. So without further ado, this concludes the meeting at 11:22, August 18th, 2022. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.